Hello, everyone. This is Zeeling, and I will be doing a quick review on a controversial topic right now. It's immigration, and it's mainly going to be uh, statements made by Benjamin Franklin and a professor from a California university by the name of Victor Davis Hanson. In general, my opinion is going to be circling around that the idea of mass migration, at first perceived to be a negative outcome and a threat to America's identity, culture, laws, eventually end up being a positive for America. And we're going to be able to see that by first starting from the perspective of Franklin's view at the time, and then how they parallel to today's, which are pretty strikingly similar. You just have to replace today's peoples with Benjamin Franklin's. So let's get started with Franklin's. These letters can be found in Franklin's autobiography. Here is just the website that has them. They're very accessible. I encourage you to read through them. You can actually see for yourself in a very detailed way that the same language, the same metaphors or concerns were being had at the time. And this predates the Americas of 1790s, but Franklin being a key founder who structured American in an Anglo-American way, till this day, we're still seeing those effects. So let's get started. Franklin starts by saying, there are supposed to be now upwards of 1 million English souls in North America. And yet perhaps there's not one the fewer in Britain, but rather more, on account of the employment the colonies afford to manufacturers at home. This million doubling, supposed but once in 25 years, will in another century be more than the people of England, and the greatest number of Englishmen will be on this side of the water. What an ascension of power to the British Empire, by sea as well as land. What increase of trade and navigation. What number of ships and seamen. We have been here but little more than 100 years, and yet the force of our privateers in the late war, united, was greater, both in men and guns, than that of the whole British Navy in Queen Elizabeth's time. So, to sum up, what he's saying is the Anglo-English in America, in these colonies, have multiplied due to the industrial advancements in the New England. And so that's benefiting the motherland as well as the New England. And then he says, and since detachment of English from Britain sent to America will have their places at home so soon supplied and increased so largely here, why should the Palatine Boers, Germans, now Palatine Boers is a way of saying a backward peasant from Germany, somebody that has a lord over them, be suffered to swarm into our settlements, and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will surely be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of our Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion? So immediately we see a complaint by Franklin that these Germans, who at the time were hired army men or hired hitmen on behalf, or mercenaries on behalf of the British Army to fight wars that they didn't have more men than they need to. And so they were fighting in behalf of Britain, and they were immigrating to America. And Franklin is saying they're coming in such a mass that they're going to completely erase what we as founders have intended these colonies to be, Pennsylvania being one of them. And then he not only makes it that they can adopt our language and our customs, but he says they can't physiologically become us. So you see the racial component that Franklin had in mind as to what the colonies should be and look like. And then this is where it's obvious how America was structured in the early beginnings, at least pre-colonial, in the colonial times, and eventually to the United States. Which leads me to add one remark, that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. While Africa is black or tawny, Asia chiefly tawny, America wholly so, and in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally what we call a swarthy complexion, as are the Germans also, the Saxons only excepted, who with the English make the principal body of white people on the face of the earth. I could wish their numbers were increased, and while we are, as I may call it, scouring our planet by clearing America of woods, and so making this side of our globe reflect a brighter light to the eyes of inhabitants in Mars or Venus, why should we, in the sight of superior beings, darken its people? Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity, by excluding all blacks and tawnies, of increasing the lovely white and red? But perhaps I'm partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind. So here we see Franklin saying the American project is supposed to be Anglo-Saxon Protestant, or what sociologists have called the WASP. And it excludes all of Europe, right? The Germans have Germany, the Italians have Italy, the Irish have Ireland, and so on and so on. They shouldn't be coming to this side of the New World because it's darkening it. So we hear the same arguments and complaints till this day, ironically, by people that Franklin said we're going to darken America and were not intended for in the building of America. So if you can keep reading this, you see how he says, those who come hither are generally the most ignorant, stupid sort of their own nation. We have heard before that Mexico is not sending their best. These third worlds are not sending their best. It's the same repetition, the same theme. And you can even, if you keep reading, you can see that how they're going to change their laws by their customs, how they only speak in their own language, how there's bilingual signs, and so on and so on and so on. But eventually, these people become a part of America. And America no longer is Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-English, but it primarily becomes all the ethno races that Benjamin Franklin says that were not intended. And America becomes a place of liberty, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness till this day, in spite of what Franklin believed was going to happen if the Spaniards, the Germans, the Swedes, and on and on and on would migrate to America. And here I'm going to talk about a present professor who says, well, because we have this mass migration in California and these laws are being affected, right? That you have bilingual aspects in school, you have communities that are also looked down upon by the people that are here in America already as stupider or darker. Yet he puts in doubt as to what the future of California is because of that. Which, in my opinion, there is no reason to doubt that eventually, as these people migrate here and eventually become concerned with their present condition here eventually turn out well. I would say that if Anglo America, would have stayed Anglo America, we wouldn't have the benefits of Wall Street, the benefits of the technological revolution that we saw in the Silicon Valley, and all the benefits, right? So here I'm going to play probably half of the video. I'm not going to take any longer than that, just to see that the parallelism is strikingly the same. And in my opinion, there's nothing to really fear about, but actually something to look forward to, that America could possibly have a second opportunity to grow even bigger than before.
They drove out pretty much the old white middle class that had come here during the Oklahoma diaspora, the Steinbeck sort of Okies, that 2 or 3 million person migration, plus the old European immigrants that came in the 19th century, early 20th century, and then Armenians, Japanese, China. A lot of these people have left, third and fourth generation, of all different races and backgrounds, and they have been replaced by Mexican-American immigrants, many of them from southern Mexico, as we saw from the racist LA council members who were so angry at what they call Oaxacan people. And so that group they felt would be a dependent constituency and mindlessly vote for their agenda. But two things have...
Here, we see the same trope. There was these people that were here longer, and they were immigrants from the 1900s. But again, keep in mind, these people from the 1900s replaced the Anglo-English. So there's already been a replacement, not just in California. In my opinion, California reflects the future of America. As California goes, so does America. They had already replaced a previous group that actually built this country. And so, to me, there is nothing negative about that. In my opinion, there's actually something positive about that, because without that, you wouldn't have Davis Hanson himself. He is a swarthy complexion, to cite Franklin's term. He was not intended to be a part of America. America was not built for him. And yet, his parents or his generations eventually migrated here. So let's continue.
Happen. One, that agenda has social mores in it that are not compatible with traditional culture. Transgender surgeries at 12 without parental consent, abortion to the last day of birth, a war on the Catholic Church, things like that. And that.
So again here, these change of mores or morals, nothing different, right? Many of the Puritans, the Anglo-English's religion, did not have the same views that most of the immigrants had. As a matter of fact, if we look at the early colonial and even some of the states eventually in America, you would get punished by murder if they were caught in adultery or not. Some opened on Sundays and some did not. Some found this to be very offensive, on the same level as transgenderism, on the same level as abortion, because they believed that those acts were worthy of death. So there's nothing new here, where you have different immigrant groups with different metaphysical or ultimate worldview, morals, and values. There's nothing different here. This has been a common struggle in America of an old class of people that were established in America, see new immigrants with different religious views and practices that are deemed to be bad for society.
Bothers, say, the Hispanic population, which is about 45, depending on how you define it, 45%. And crime. They are insulated more against crime than the people, say, in Fresno or Bakersfield or Merced. They don't have the resources, the private patrols, the security, when you bring in that many people. And then if people are a new generation of electric contractors, plumbers, roofers, and that is pretty much the new emerging Latino middle class. And they look at wire that's suddenly not $33 a spool, but Romex electrical wire is $180. Or they look at a sheet of plywood that was $8, it's $70. Or they look at plastic pipe to do a plumbing job for somebody, and instead of $50, it's $200. And then that person, I can't, what's going on? And they'll say, I don't know what's going on. I just fill up my diesel truck, I paid $7 a gallon. I don't know what's going on. Who's doing this?
In America, the complaint about taxation and pricing of things in the market are common, right? America is built on that revolution that the elites, the people in power, organize the market in a certain way where they benefit at the exclusion of the middle class. And the middle class has to fight and get involved in politics, restructure the market so that their interests are taken into account. Nothing different.
So I think you're going to see that constituency in a historical shift that could approach 45 to 50% of the Hispanic vote will not vote Democratic or will stay home. And that's going to be, and it's just starting that revolutionary cycle. I think it's going to be very important for the future of California.
Do you think the rest of Californians will make a shift in the near future?
Yeah, I think they will. I don't think it'll be more pragmatic. They'll feel that what's going on is not sustainable. They'll say to themselves, my son is 25, he cannot afford a house. My daughter can't pay her electric bill. We can't take a Sunday drive anymore.
And you can say the same thing about the Irish that were coming here into America in the early 1900s. One of the things you learn in history class in college is that there was 2-3 families of Irish immigrants living in one place because they couldn't afford to buy a home due to the fact that the people that were established at the time weren't paying wages that they can actually be independent. Yes, this happens. It's in America. It's a common trend.
Because of the price of fuel. We cannot turn our air conditioner on in July in Bakersfield. We can't have advanced placement in our local school because we have all these people coming in from countries that need bilingual education. And so,
as you can see here about bilingual education, go and read what I posted on Benjamin Franklin. It's the same complaint. Bilingual education is necessary to the point that it's going to change our society, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a very natural thing. So you can go watch the whole video, right? And you can see for yourself and compare to what Franklin said. But to sum up, in my opinion, there's really nothing to panic about. I believe that these people that are rejected, excluded, right, that are deemed illegal or not part of the American process, although in Franklin's time, that didn't exist, right? After Ellis Island, the immigrants of the 1900s wised up and said, we need to close the borders and have a legal process because then it's going to affect our employment. So they organized the system to protect their wages and not let the wave of free markets and immigration that naturally happens into America affect their interests. So in my opinion, this mass migration we're seeing eventually becomes a positive for America. That's my opinion by reading history and observing and reading letters from Franklin and actually seeing what the actual outcome was of America being redefined ethno-racially. And yes, it is important to preserve, the views of inheritance tax in America, property rights, freedom of speech. That's important. And that's why understanding the Constitution and reading the Constitution should always be fought for. But ultimately, mass migration has never been a negative for America. You might see some kind of crime rise because there's this lack of integration, but eventually these groups that were structurally designed to be excluded by the laws of their day, made by the elite or the people in power, eventually become integrated and benefit America. So those are my thoughts.